We usually cover in class that are going to be like this, and we're going to be doing several of those. Those are typically on-the-job video cases, okay? So if you go to the end of the chapters they're in, it's going to be, and you just click on that one. This one here is a different one, but this is one from chapter 4, Black Diamond, which is more on talking about the global environment. But you basically would do the same for any of these, okay? Okay, so if you go back here, go down here to chapter 3, okay? It goes into Mind Tap. Since I was on that page already, it should automatically come up to one in chapter 3. Okay, and this is the one on the Campbell. Okay, so if you guys want to go back, this is the one that had on just the one last question. The question is always down below. Okay, so if you, and again, the other one was in chapter 2. Okay, that we covered. So both of those were, that's how you can go back to these and review them if you want to. They're at the end of the chapter. Okay, so just by going to the textbook. I get to compute. The extra question, okay, was what happens, what did you think about the Barcelona group? Okay, how do you think the current reaction would have impacted it? Okay, do you think they would have changed their management style? Okay, based on their current situation? Because there is some things about the current situation that are unique, right? Okay, there's some consideration employees, especially in that industry, don't want to work in it, obviously, because there's close personal contact. So what do you think, based on the video, do you think they would have changed what they're doing based on the current situation? So that's the fourth question. Okay. All right, so today we're kind of moving into one aspect I talked about of modern, what I call the modern method of management, right? We covered the history last week. We talked a little bit about the modern management scenarios. One of those things that's about modern management is, doesn't matter whether you're a small business or a large business, there's a component there that's called globalization, okay? And why do you think I say that it doesn't matter whether you're big or small? Your mom and pop, how would the global environment matter to you? Why does the global environment matter to you? You're the sub shop down the street, or a house of pizza over here. Does globalization, does the global environment impact that? Okay, that's one aspect. Everybody hear him? A little bit lower outside. But go ahead, you just repeat it a little bit louder.
So, like other franchise that like the globalization internationally coming here and like take over your business or they can drive you globalization.
Yeah, I would say probably the former is going to be probably the more impactful. Okay, you know, the latter probably a little less. Give an example of House of Pizza. Okay, but them plopping down, say, a Pizza Hut across the street there probably would impact their business, right? Okay, it's a similar venue. It's Domino's. It's a multinational corporation. Okay, they have Pizza Huts all over the world. Okay, and Pizza Huts in China. You know, I mean, so they do have them all over the world. That franchise doesn't work all over the world. What's another impact to them? Probably a little more direct impact to them, because there is one. How about buying their product? Okay. How much of that product that they're buying do you think is actually in the U.S.? Okay. Probably 50 or 60% probably. But there's also things that they aren't buying. They're registered, right? The US makes none of that type of stuff, okay? They don't make any electronics here in the US, or very few, very little. So they're cash register, okay? They're credit card machines. All that stuff is made overseas, okay? So being able to get parts for those things that they break, okay? Guarantee half of their equipment in the kitchen is not manufactured in the US, okay? Almost all of it is probably, most of that is probably produced overseas, whether that's Europe or China or Southeast Asia, okay? So it doesn't matter. This aspect of globalization didn't occur 50 years ago when we were going through those first two phases, right? Globalization, originally when they started out with that historical perspective, manufacturing was in the US, okay, or in England, but they rarely actually crossed between each other, okay? It wasn't really until the late 90s, into the 2000s that you saw this explosion of the global marketplace. When we started to be, now there's some disadvantages that we'll see. But Hofstad basically came up with this aspect of how to take a business into that global environment and what some of those factors are that are important. So the first thing we're going to take a look at is what he actually said in relation to what's important when you go global. The internet is very slow in this building. I thought it was a little slow over there, but it's much slower here.
Individualism, masculinity and femininity, uncertainty avoidance, and short-term personal culture is the set of shared values and beliefs that affect the perceptions, decisions, and behavior of people from a particular country. Professor Geert Hofstede spent 20 years studying culture in 53 countries. His research shows 5 consistent cultural dimensions across countries: power distance, individualism, masculinity and femininity, uncertainty avoidance, and short-term versus long-term orientation. Power distance is the extent to which people accept that power is distributed unequally in society and organizations. In countries where power distance is weak, people want to say in decisions that affect them. Individualism is the degree to which societies believe that people work for their own benefit versus working for the benefit of a larger group. Masculinity and femininity are assertive versus nurturing cultures. Masculine cultures emphasize things like assertiveness and achievement. And feminine cultures emphasize the importance of relationships and quality of life. Uncertainty avoidance is the degree to which people in a country are uncomfortable with unstructured, ambiguous, and unpredictable situations. Short-term versus long-term orientation addresses whether cultures seek immediate gratification or defer gratification. Short-term orientations are consumer-driven, while long-term orientations are savings-driven. It is probably pretty easy to see, based on these culture differences, why a global mindset, which appreciates and influences individuals, groups, organizations, and systems representing various cultures, is a significant strength for today's effective global management.
So why do we care about any of this? Why Hofstede? So Hofstede, when he studied this, he spent 20 years looking at different societies. Why is it important for us to understand that? What's the difference between the US and China? You laugh. Give me an example. What's the difference between the US and China? Okay, language is one, and that's definitely one. Okay. What else? about government? Right? What is the government in China? Take a guess. Okay, it's not. They're communists, right? Okay, which is kind of it's a kind of a fancy word for. It was started originally as a socialist society, but now in most government people will tell you it's kind of somewhere between socialism and it's combined with a dictatorship. Okay, so if you're looking at China, do you think it's real easy to do things there? Okay, how easy is it for a U.S. company with U.S. values to try to start a business in China? We're going to look at a couple of them on Friday that made some real serious mistakes. Okay, it's very difficult, right? What are some things that you know about China? What's that? They make a lot of things that are imported into the U.S. Yes, they do import. We import a lot of stuff from them. But I'll give you one example. You think there's social media in China? Okay. Oh, there is, but I can tell you, having been there, it's tightly controlled and monitored. Okay. Do you think they have open access to the internet? Absolutely not. Everything in the internet goes through the government filters. Okay. So the government controls everything there. Controls everything. Controls what you do for a living. Yes. Yeah, they do have. Yeah, they do have a. I think it's a two-child policy. Okay, mainly because they were getting so big that they couldn't contain the population there. That is one definitely difference. But it's emphasized there is the government controls everything about a person's life. Okay, you do not have free movement there. Okay, so you have to go through the government to do anything. Do you think if you're doing business in Canada, for instance, do you think you have to go through the government in Canada? No, right? Now, especially with the trade agreement, NAFTA, okay? You just do business with it, okay? If you're on the border with Mexico, do you think you have to confer with the Mexican government for that? Not a whole lot, right? I mean, you still have, in both countries, you still have to adhere to their laws, but they're not controlling what you do. You want to go build a tequila distillery in the middle of nowhere in Mexico, they're all for it, as long as you're paying your taxes and adhering to the labor laws that are in Mexico. Okay, that's how trade was impacted, right, globally. Okay, and just to take the cars that you drive. How many of them think they're made in the USA? Okay, Ford. You think Ford's built here? Actually, pretty Ford. Is it made here? Okay. Nope, it's not. It's not made here. It is assembled here. And some parts come from here. Okay. There are some parts that are made in the US, not all. Okay. But most of them are made in Mexico and shipped here and assembled. Okay. Even the BMW plant down the street, okay, in Greenville, okay, they import all their parts. Everything comes in. That's just an assembly plant. Okay. Hyundai, which is the one I think that's in Tennessee, just over the border in Tennessee, is the same way. They import all their, and almost all of them, doesn't matter whether it's BMW or it's Hyundai, they're getting their parts from Mexico. Why? It's way cheaper to manufacture those parts there. And then they assemble the final product here, which is kind of important because we have our labor force is a little more technical. Okay, what they're building in Mexico is frames and bodies and things like that. That they need. It's labor intensive, and they want to make that cheap labor. Okay, so they ship everything in and assemble them down the street. Okay, and that includes the BMW. Okay. Although some of their parts come from Europe, obviously, because they're proprietary. But a lot of their bodies and the steel and all that stuff is all manufactured in Mexico. The steel for buildings, up until recently, it was all imported from China. For about 80% of the steel that we had in the U.S., the raw product steel came from China. Okay, we still manufacture some steel here in the U.S., but very little. Okay, a lot of the manufacturing from the 90s on went elsewhere because our labor got too expensive. It also went away from Europe for the same reasons. Okay, so when you start looking at those things as a company, you've got to decide as a manager where you're going to do business with and why. Okay, yeah. Other than China has really cheap products and really cheap labor, so that's offset by the fact that they're extremely difficult to deal with. Okay, because everything goes to the government there. Okay, you don't even as a foreigner. Okay, in a plant, one of the videos in the book talked about a global company who manufactures stuff in several countries in the world. And one of them is they make clothing in the Philippines. Okay. And that clothing manufacturer, when they decided to go there, they decided to go there, but put their management there, so they could control the aspect. As a lot of our clothing is made in that area of the world. Is it made very well? Anybody look at the tags in Walmart where your clothes are made from? Okay, almost all of them are made in those Southeast Asian companies, Malaysia, the Philippines. Okay. Why? Because labor is cheap, and they can actually, and the materials are cheap to get in and out of the Philippines. So they can ship raw materials in there, make the clothing, and then ship them back. Okay, a few years ago, Nike got in trouble with India, I think it was, because obviously they were doing the same thing there, but some of their clothing wasn't holding to the standards that they were looking for, so they took a hit. Okay. And they had to send people in to reinforce the standards that they're looking for. Because again, because of the government, the individuals, the culture there is to do things quickly and efficiently, great management skills, but they're really not anything, the quality aspect goes down. Our goods from China, right? Don't last very long, right? Even cars now don't last as long as they did those cars that were made before probably 1990. Again, because you were looking at those aspects again. So Hofstad looked at this and said, okay, these are the key factors that we need to look at, and how that culture works is important to us if we're going to consider moving into that environment. Because some cultures don't work really well. Us in China probably never really worked super well, and it probably is even worse now, okay, from a cultural perspective. Even some of the societies in Europe right now are having difficulties because they're looking at things from a more socialistic aspect. So things are a little bit tougher when you're looking at things like government regulations and those types of things. So let's take a look now. Let's take a look at how we would actually look at getting into the global environment. Okay. So this one here is a quick little clip on, and we're going to talk a little bit more about how business entities work. Okay. You'll get a little bit more of this in business law. Okay, as well. But it's a little bit important to us to take a look at how you would look at entry into the global environment.
Managers entering global markets must consider whether their firms will export goods to other countries or arrange for them to be produced locally there. Managers must also consider whether firms will own their production assets or share them with another party. Exporting means producing in the home nation and transferring products to sell abroad. Exporting is cheaper and less risky. But there are physical distances, government regulations, foreign currencies, and cultural differences to consider. Direct investing means that the company is involved in managing assets in another country. Within this dimension, managers can choose low ownership structures like licensing, or high ownership structures like alliances, joint ventures, or even taking full ownership of foreign corporations with a wholly owned subsidiary. With licensing, corporations make certain resources available to companies in another country, including technology, managerial skills, and trademark rights. In joint ventures, companies form a strategic alliance or partnership and share costs and risk with another firm, typically in the host country. These partnerships are often the fastest, cheapest, and least risky way to globalize. Finally, with wholly owned foreign affiliates or acquired companies or divisions, the home company has complete control. This may provide cost savings over exporting by shortening distribution channels and reducing storage and transportation costs, and local managers have a better understanding of economic, cultural, and political conditions.
Okay, so when you start to look at going to the global environment, there's several ways that you can actually do that. Okay, and the first one that we're going to look at, okay, is wholly owned. Okay, company X decides they're going to go to Mexico. So what they're going to do is they're going to plop down and build a plant in Mexico. Okay. So some of the advantages there are, one of the advantages is they control everything, right? Because they own it. So they can control every aspect of that. Is that a good thing? Control a good thing? In most places, yeah, you want as much control as you can because you control the aspects of that product, okay? Another advantage there is you're not dealing, there's no middleman. Okay, so there's not, typically most of the time there, they plop that plant down in Mexico, and then they in turn ship that stuff off to back to the US. There's a few other things that have advantages to this there too. There's also, there's a minimum currency exchange value. So anybody heard the term currency exchange? Okay. Anybody travel in here? Anybody traveled out of the country? Okay. Okay, a couple of you guys that have, right? You know that chances are if you're going away, you're not buying things in the US dollar. Okay, so you're going to at some point exchange your money for currency that's in whatever country you're going to. Okay. For instance, when I was in Switzerland, I was paid in Swiss francs. And I would have, luckily the Swiss franc was roughly the same as the US dollar, give or take a few pennies, okay, when it exchanged in the US dollars. But if you were going to go to Peru, for instance, okay, the Peruvian dollar is nowhere near what the US dollar is, okay? So the valuation of currency becomes an issue in business and where you're going to locate, okay? When you get into the corporate finance course, you're going to definitely be covering that because it's definitely an aspect of globalization these days. But if you're a wholly owned company, okay, and your company is the person who is, you know, you're owned in the U.S. and your plant there is owned by the U.S. Typically, you're probably going to be doing in U.S. dollars only. So there's really not an issue as much there in the currency value. You don't have any risk there, okay, of losing money, okay? Now, if you're, so wholly owned, what are some disadvantages do you think of that? Anybody see any disadvantages there? What's that? Yeah, legal liability. You have full liability. Good one. Somebody decides to blow that plant up. Okay. Are you liable for those workers' deaths? Probably yes, if you own that company. Absolutely. What's another one? Kind of along the same line. If you're a U.S. company, you have to abide by U.S. law. And the other countries' laws. So we're going down to Peru again, okay, and taking that business down there. Do you think Peru's labor laws are at the same as the U.S.? Do you think you have to pay or going to Mexico? Do you think Mexican labor laws are tougher than the U.S.? Probably not. No, they're definitely not. Okay. There's no such thing as minimum wage. I don't think it exists down there. There's no OSHA, which protects worker safety down there. Okay. So, but if you're a wholly owned company, there's a good chance you are going to have to abide by U.S. law. Okay. So even though you're operating in another country, you're going to really have to abide by U.S. law. So those two right there alone are huge deterrents for you to wholly own something in another country. However, if you need that control, whatever you're producing, you need that control, you're going to have to figure out a way to get that control without actually owning that country. Okay? So the next one aspect is joint venture. Okay? And joint ventures can take a number of opportunities there. Okay? But the most popular is company A in the US and company B in any other country. They get together and say, okay, we're going to do business together. Okay? I can tell you this is probably the #1 way that they do business in China. Okay? So why is a joint venture important in a country like China? Would be an advantage there. You know somebody knows their laws, right? We're going to look at a company in India actually on Friday. Is one of those companies I had, which implies this. Basically, when you're in a joint venture, that company's already established in there. They're ingrained in that society. So culturally, they understand everything. Regulatory, they understand everything. And so what you're really doing is purchasing, they're making goods for you and then selling them to you. Okay? So very similarly to the way the car industry typically is now. Okay? Those parts are all made up in various countries around the world, and they're basically then manufactured and then sold to Ford or BMW or whatever. Okay? But they really don't necessarily they don't own those companies, okay? It's made by a company in those other countries. The reason why that's important is because they're already set up to do business there, okay? China is a very restrictive country, right? We established that. So you're going to have to deal with a company that's already established in China because you're not, as a U.S. company, you're not plopping down a plant in China, not anytime soon. Okay, so you're going to deal with some Chinese company in a situation where it's a joint venture. Okay? Then there's going to be this other host of other types of things. Okay? Couple of disadvantages there, obviously, for the most part, is you don't own anything there. You don't control anything in that joint venture, okay? Which means you don't really, they're just basically giving you goods. And quality is a huge issue when it comes to those. Okay, so this last part of this are things like franchises, licensing. Okay. We mentioned franchises before, right? What is a franchise? What's a franchise? Okay. It's an organization. Okay, that's true. What else? This is a key one for most business in the US today, right? The reason why is a lot of places franchise. Okay. If you take a look around here, Pat's Burgers. Do you think they own all those? One person owns all those? Not sure, but typically that would be. Firehouse Subs, Subway, the Hilton Hotel down here. Are those all owned by, that hotel owned by Hilton? No, it's not. I do know that, okay? That's operated on what they call a franchise agreement, okay? So basically, one person sets up that business, okay? Chick-fil-A started as one single store. McDonald's started as one single store. McDonald's is actually the one who actually designed this system, okay? They're the original franchise, okay? What they did is they went in, Ray Kroc, anybody seen the movie? I can't remember the title now, but basically it's about the Ray Kroc and the founding of McDonald's. And what they did is they went in and bought out an existing process. They liked how this burger joint was doing their process. Okay, so they bought into the restaurant and then eventually bought the guy out. Okay, because he had developed this process. Franchises are about marketing and process. Okay, so Hilton has designed the way they want to do business. Marriott has designed the way they want to do business. Okay, you're going to find, but what they do then is sell that operation to another owner. Okay, so the Chick-fil-A that's here in town is owned by, I think they own like 3 of them, but that's all they own, is they own 3 of them. Okay, what they did is bought from Chick-fil-A, okay, on the rights to do business under their name. So they bought their logo, they bought their facility blueprint, they bought marketing dollars or marketing, the whole marketing for them, okay, and their product line and their menu. Okay, so they spec everything, and then Chick-fil-A basically says, okay, we've developed this, now we're going to sell it in pop-up stands, stores everywhere. Okay, now there's a little more science to that, but basically they're licensing the way they do things. What's the advantage there? What's the advantage to the original company? Money, yeah, big money. Okay, because basically what they've developed the process, but they don't have. They can become like Chick-fil-A is now all over the country. Okay, Firehouse Subs. Okay, the sub place that's here in town started in Jacksonville, Florida, almost like 20 years ago. Okay, founded actually by firemen in Jacksonville, Florida. Okay, but they built a system. Okay, and then what they do is develop that system and marketed that system out around there. So it's a very good way of doing business, right? Do you have control over that? Do you have control over that business? Partial control, yes. It actually depends on how well you'll hear me a lot of times in business classes refer to Firehouse because their control is extreme. Okay, they're probably one of the ones that are the tightest franchise control. Them and Chick-fil-A, I would say, are probably about on the same level. Okay, if you walk into a Chick-fil-A here and you walk into a Chick-fil-A anywhere else in the entire country, they're going to be about at the same standard. Okay, you're going to hear them say the same lines. You're going to hear them say the same. The menus are going to be predominantly the same. Okay, but they have got that process. But what they do is they pay a lot on the franchise side for that control. Okay, so they get partial control, but that partial control is probably more like 65, 70% control. Okay, which means they're controlling everything. People from those types of franchises, they send inspectors in all the time. Marriott Hotels does the same thing. Okay, that's why you can walk into a courtyard or any particular brand of theirs, and it's pretty consistent no matter where you go. The quality standards are pretty consistent. Okay, because they spend a lot in sending people out to make sure that happens. But when you're going to a foreign country, do you think you want to give up that control? Okay. Do you think that franchises work in some places and they don't work in others? Okay. Franchises don't work so well in China, although there are a few. Okay. Again, because there's a clash there between standards and government regulations. Okay. Licensing, though, on the other hand, what is licensing? Okay, kind of along the same lines, licensing. You guys all got Adidas wear, right? Yeah. Colleague says business with Adidas, right? Do you think Adidas makes all that stuff? Do you think they personally manufacture all that stuff? No. What they do is they operate under what they call a licensing agreement. So wherever that's made, they're licensing that particular manufacturer to make that for them. Okay. Actually, most pro football, most pro teams now, they don't even control the licensing anymore for the most part. It goes through, anybody here of Fanatics? Okay. Fanatics now, it covers probably a lot of the pro teams, doesn't matter whether it's hockey, basketball, baseball a little less, but definitely the NFL teams, they've contracted their licensing out to somebody else because it's tough to handle. Okay. Well, basically, they're licensing a set of standards to make that goods for them, okay, and distribute them under their name, okay, just like Adidas or Nike or any of the rest of those. But they're licensing a set of standards, okay, a little more control than a franchise in most cases. Franchises are a little less controllable unless you set them up to be really controlled. Okay, so as you're going into there. These here, again, you have less control if you're going national, right? Because basically what you're doing is you're turning both of these over to somebody else. Whether it's to make your goods for them, or whether it's to under licensing, or it's to operate your business. Okay? You're hoping that they're going to adhere to your standards. Okay? But it's a little less control. So each one of those depends upon all those aspects of what Hofstede said. How you're going to set up and do business globally, if you're looking to expand that, really depends on what Hofstede said. Okay? What were those social values? What's that government structure? What's their sense of control or ownership? Okay? And what we're going to do on Friday is we're going to look at, I think it's 6 companies. We have 6 or 8 companies that we're going to look at. So you want to make sure that you guys, because you're going to do a little in-class research here, and we're going to look at several different companies that went global. Some of them did well, some of them didn't do so well when they went into the global market. Okay, so we're going to really take a look at those at the end on Friday in class. So, and I think I'll probably end up right there for today. And then we'll pick up with that exercise on Friday, guys. What's that?
For the impact discussion, you just want the